Let's start with the definition of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a brain disease. Its defining feature is psychosis, or being out of touch with reality. Delusions and hallucinations are hallmarks of the illness. Delusions are fixed and false beliefs that aren't responsive to evidence, and hallucinations are false sensory experiences. For example, when I'm a psychotic, I often have the delusion that I've killed hundreds of thousands of people with my thoughts. I sometimes have the idea that nuclear explosions are about to be set off in my brain. Occasionally I have hallucinations, like one time I turned around and saw a man with a raised knife. Imagine having a nightmare while you're awake. Often, speech and thinking become disorganized to the point of incoherence. Loose associations involves putting together words that may sound a lot alike but don't make sense. And if the words get jumbled up enough, it's called word salad. Contrary to what many people think, schizophrenia is not the same as multiple personality disorder or split personality. The schizophrenic mind is not split, but shattered.
There have been numerous television series, especially recently, and films to include the main character who has schizophrenia or exhibits symptoms of the condition. Often, the symptoms of auditory or visual hallucination and fragmentation of time provides a key source of dramatic tension in these television series. Simultaneously, there are also films that have been categorized by academics as representative of postmodern schizophrenia, a term used to describe the human condition in the postmodern era. Postmodernism is a broad movement in art, literature, history, and philosophy. It is typically characterized by the ironic play with styles, citations, and narrative levels, skepticism towards the grand narrative of Western culture, a questioning of the virtual versus the real and what constitutes it, and a waning of affect, a process in which a person loses their active ability to create a sense of continuity between past and future, and must organise their temporal existence into one coherent experience. This waning of affect, Frederick Jameson argues, induces a state of consciousness similar to schizophrenia. Some postmodern academics draw upon symptoms of schizophrenia, particularly those related to time and language, to attempt to grapple with concepts of subjectivity and identity. However, TV and film including characters with schizophrenia and the academic approach to the concept of postmodern schizophrenia can both potentially diminish the experience of those living with schizophrenia and negatively and incorrectly shape our perception of the condition. How do the two narrative models link? How have they influenced our perception of schizophrenia? What challenges are there to face in the future regarding accurate and progressive representation? Jameson and Baudrillard developed the notion of the postmodern schizophrenic experience as a historically contextualized process and is the causality of late capitalist modernity, which replaces meaning and belief systems continually. Baudrillard argued the postmodern universe is one of hyperreality, where entertainment information and communication technologies provide experiences more intense than real life.
We live in a dual reality. All other animals live in an objective reality. Their reality consists of objective entities like rivers and trees and lions and elephants. But over the centuries, we have constructed on top of this objective reality a second layer of fictional reality, a reality made of fictional entities like nations, like gods, like money, like corporations. And what is amazing that as history unfolded, this fictional reality became more and more powerful, so that today the most powerful forces in the world are these fictional entities that exist only in our own imagination.
Hyperreality produces fundamentally empty appearances. However, this artificial simulation appears more real than real and becomes a desirable choice for our consciousness. The general depthlessness of postmodernism leads to the collapse of the past and future due to the constant nowness of the hyperreal. The continuous present is experienced by the postmodern schizophrenic subject with the loss of reality and identity. In Fight Club, the narrator's psychotic split in personality reflects the postmodern subject's loss of identity. In order to deal with his unhappiness, having found himself living in an empty consumer-led life,
I'd flip through catalogs and wonder, what kind of dining set defines me as a person?
he creates his second personality that can provide an alternative.
Reject the basic assumption of civilization, especially the importance of material possession.
In conjunction with the reclaiming of masculinity, the narrator's fighting and aggression strives to bring his body back to life and to revitalise the physical and emotional stagnation that has developed from late capitalist postmodernity. Tyler Durden is presented as both a hallucination and an alter ego, and shows convergence of schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder symptoms, and contributes to the muddling between the two illnesses.
That's me.
While Fight Club may exhibit a sense of postmodern schizophrenia, it does not accurately touch on the clinical element with misconceptions of academic and journalists alike. Dangerously, Fight Club suggests the only solution to the loss of reality, identity, and meaning in any postmodern sense and/or clinical sense is to destroy the self. This loss of reality and the flattening of depth stems partly from the postmodern disintegration of language. Ferdinand de Saussure conceptualized modern understanding of linguistics and signs. He showed that the sign is the object that combines the signifier and the signified into a meaningful unit. The signifier is the physical existence, while the signified is the idea or concept of the sign. Baudrillard's postmodern schizophrenia suggests the widening gap between signifier and signified, as they're continually reinterpreted and given new meanings. In advertising, for example, commodities become about selling lifestyles and relevant socio-political ideas, not the physical quality of the product. Historically, the pioneers of this concept include companies such as Coca-Cola, selling their drink through the idea of peace and love through the countercultural youth of the 60s. And cigarette companies, selling liberation and freedom through women's rights movements.
Give a woman the right to vote, and by heavens, next thing you know, she'll want to smoke like a man.
This is the taste for today's woman.
The reality of the sign and the signified no longer correlate to the signifier. Baudrillard's postmodern schizophrenic condition results from an over-proximity to mediated images and emergence of mass communication information. Memento explores and plays out the postmodern fragmentation of language and reinterpretation of signs. Leonard's reality is lost when his short-term memory constantly erases and his grip on the signified is lost. For Jamieson, identity is a function of language. A coherent sense of self is created and sustained through the temporal organisation of linguistic signifiers. He says, when the links of that signifying chain snap, then we have schizophrenia in the form of rubble and distinct and unrelated signifiers. Leonard's Polaroid photographs, which he uses to navigate his environment, have come to replace reality, as all signifiers have lost their relation to the signified. They are distinct and unrelated, because Leonard is unable to attach a signified meaning to them. They are for Leonard definitive markers of history. Leonard's identity is fractured, not only because of the postmodern unreliability of a photograph being an objective record, but because Leonard attaches continually shifting meanings to his photographs. They're crossed out, rewritten, and revised in relation to his immediate context.
Memory's unreliable.
Oh, please.
No, really. Memory's not perfect. It's not even that good. Look, memory can change the shape of a room. It can change the color of a car. And memories can be distorted. They're just an interpretation. They're not a record. And they're irrelevant if you have the facts.
In this way, Leonard's signifiers, which he regards as definitive markers of history, undergo a process of re-signification. His photographs become, as Baudrillard would put, are hyperreality. The photographs become fake representations of history, a copy of history that has no original. This means that any clear relationship between the photographs and their referent is compromised. Additionally, Jamieson says, if we are unable to unify the past, present, and future of the sentence, then we're similarly unable to unify the past, present, and future of our own biographical experience. Leonard's inability to unify the past, present, and future of his own biographical experience stems from his resignification, but it's also shown through the film's chronology. The events of the film run so that each narrative segment is an experience that cannot be placed in any kind of narrative context other than the present.
And my solution to telling the story subjectively was to deny the audience the same information that the protagonist is denied. And my approach to doing that was to effectively tell the story backwards.
Consequently, the audience must decode the images and narrative.
Oh, I'm chasing this guy.
Just as Leonard attempts to provide structures to his own fragmented knowledge.
He's chasing me.
Memento represents a dramatisation of postmodern schizophrenia, exhibiting a loss of meaning and language and signs, and a fracturing of memory and history as a result. Postmodernism and schizophrenia have been associated for so long by so many that it has become commonplace to say that contemporary culture is schizophrenic. However, there are problems with using schizophrenia as illustrative of contemporary subjectivity. It overinflates symbolic capacity at the expense of those living with the condition, and consequently conceals some of its more troubling symptoms, especially a reduced awareness of positive and negative symptoms.
I'm Pete Holloway. I'm a rare breed of consultant drama therapist in the NHS, across the range of mental health and psychiatry for the last 30 years. Classically, those initial presentations of psychosis and the potential diagnosis of schizophrenia is seen in terms of the absence of both positive symptoms and negative symptoms. And let's not mistake these as kind of morally descriptive terms or anything like that. Positive doesn't mean, oh, they're okay, and negative, oh, they're... It's about the kind of level of psychological activity and energy and the direction of that activity and energy related to the presentation. So in positive symptoms, what you tend to see is very active distortions in thinking, beliefs, and behavior. And in negative symptoms, what you tend to see is the absence of some normative ways of being. So you might see a lack of energy, a lack of interest, a lack of even feeling like we have our own mind or are capable of putting thoughts together. So the negative symptoms are characterized by the absence of things, and the positive symptoms describe those things that go above and beyond normal everyday thinking.
Typically, negative symptoms are far more common in clinical presentation. Yet, there is a continual fascination with the hallucinations and supposed reality-bending experiences. Undone explores experiences of time and identity through the main character who has schizophrenia, Alma.
I'm seeing my dead father because of my big brain ventricles, and he's training me to travel in time so I can save him from being murdered.
Undone exhibits a rotoscoped aesthetic, live action images that have been animated over frame by frame, adding a dreamlike and transcendent quality.
This is the kind of animation we want because it's very realistic, it's very grounded, and what we're doing is playing with the flexibility of reality. So we want to bring you into a world that feels very real, and but also allows for movement, allows for stretchiness.
It can be argued that Undone represents schizophrenia as a gateway to experience other realities, and that the show makes mental illness look fantastical. But if all illusions take place solely from Alma's perspective and her mind, her whole experience becomes a reflection of her worldview, such as her warped thought about shamanism, religion, and spirituality.
Research had recently come out showing that people with schizophrenia, like my mother, they have large ventricles. Maybe mystics and priestesses and shamans, maybe they also have larger ventricles. Maybe their abilities come from a specific brain structure.
And what'd you find?
Well, actually, the few that did let me scan them had larger brain pockets.
Huh.
In Western culture, those people are locked up or they're put out on the street.
So
We need to carefully develop your potential.
Or I'll be put out on the street? I don't know, Dad.
Okay. Again.
Do we simply interpret them as signs of madness? In which case, we have to persuade people to have insight into their own madness? Or do we see them as alternative ways of making sense of our experience, whatever experience that might be, and help people to find a way of making meaning from those experiences? And what the direction of certainly psychological treatments has gone over the last 10 years is the latter.
Undone never discounts Alma's visions or implies they're fake or unimportant. Her conversations with her deceased father and her temporal fragmentation are part of her reality and her journey that allows her to process her distress. As such, it's how she eventually accepts the help she needs. However, the commonality of word salads and word association is also infrequently depicted in contemporary shows, Undone included.
So word salad is where the association is so idiosyncratic to the individual that what kind of comes out of their mouth is meaningless to any listener. It might have an intrinsic meaning for them, but explaining that in language that other people can understand or in vocabulary that other people can understand seems really difficult.
This is mainly caused by the rapid spread of semantic and linguistic memory, too quickly for the mind to keep up.
Crumbling world. Word. Voice. Tell the clocks to stop. Time has come.
Ultimately, what ties together a text exhibiting postmodern schizophrenia or a person with schizophrenia is primarily the loss of meaning. The current reaction to the postmodern loss of meaning is shown in the emergence of post-postmodernism, also referred to as metamodernism, a set of developments attempting to rebuild meaning through the combination of modernist and postmodernist means. The reinterpretation of meaning is also being reflected upon for treating clinical schizophrenia.
What we have tended to do as a mental health profession in previous years is impose clinically significant medical meaning on those experiences, i.e. you are psychiatrically ill, whereas through the whole sort of patient self-advocacy movement, service user movement, and progressive practitioners, we're now moving towards actually trying to enable people to find meaning in those experiences for themselves.
Significantly, when discussing, viewing, and watching TV or film regarding schizophrenia, it is important to remember schizophrenia's etymology and the inherent fallacy that it creates.
The biggest cultural mistake that we have made within Western culture, Western literature, artistic presentations of schizophrenia, all the rest of it, is this idea that it is somehow the split mind. It's not. It's the fractured mind, the shattered mind, the incoherent mind.
The schizophrenic mind is not split, but shattered. A message to the entertainment industry and to the press. Please continue to let us see characters in your movies, your plays, your columns who suffer with severe mental illness. Portray them sympathetically and portray them in all the richness and depth of their experience as people and not as diagnoses.